Hey everybody, this is X.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Felicia. We're the Utah Outcasts.
3 out, unashamed, and active atheists living in Utah.
And we are personally inviting you to let us love your ears each and every week.
As we take the news, current events, and pop culture and give it a little twist.
A love twist, with consent.
And we'll be joined each week by a special guest to tell us what makes them an outcast like us.
Come find us.
The Utah Outcasts.
On podhell.com, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play,
Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
And on utahoutcast.com.
We finally bought that domain off the kids handing out mixtapes in the mall.
Come be an outcast with us.
Take care of yourselves out there.
Bonne nuit.
And you're welcome.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Secular Stories. My name's Jonathan Tyndall, your host. Before we get into the interview tonight, I'd just like to mention Jason Camo. He does our intro and outro music. If you'd like to be able to find more of his music, you can go to www.aloststateofmind.com. Also, you can go to Podheld Media at podheld.com, and you can listen to our parent podcast, the Atheist Podcast, along with a lot of other great shows. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Bryce Blankenangel, the host of the award-winning podcast, Naked Mormonism. He can be found at, shockingly, www.nakedmormonism.com and at Naked Mormonism on your favorite podcatching app. So, Bryce, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
Oh, pretty good. You know, it's nice and early in the morning. I know it's early in the morning for you too. So
yeah.
All right.
And I know you sent in your invitation for this interview. Hey, do you want to join me with some form of beer or wine or alcohol? And I'm like, yeah, sure. But you know, the whole 8 o'clock in the morning, I just can't quite get on board with that. I know I'm not actually employed. I don't have a day job, but 8 o'clock in the morning drinking just a little bit too much for me there, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not too good for me either. It's 11 o'clock here at my time, so.
Fair enough. Stick to the coffee. Coffee's good.
Yeah. Well, we're doing Kool-Aid here at the house right now because it's almost lunchtime for me. All right. So, Bryce, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Your religious views back in the day, your religious views nowadays, your current situation, job, all that kind of sort of thing. Introduce yourself to my listeners.
Well, I'll just give a kind of the elevator spiel it is, I guess. So I was born and raised in Utah, true and blue Mormon. And, when I turned about, 16 years old or so, I started getting bored with church and didn't want to go anymore and pretty much stopped going. Transcend a few, life-changing events, landed me in Colorado, and I started doing some research on Mormon history and how fascinating it is, and on just any religion in general, but a strong focus on Mormonism. And through my various studies and my various religious text readings and whatnot, I came to this understanding that humanism or just a secular lifestyle is pretty much the only intellectually tenable position to hold at any time. So I became this, self-professed atheist, and then started doing research and listening to other atheist podcasts and whatnot. And I would hear people talk about things in Mormonism or in Mormon history or whatnot, and I'd have to go check it, or I'd have to go verify it or prove them wrong or prove them right or whatever. And I kept hearing these little tiny blurbs that would interest me so much. Like, one podcast does a single episode that is like a Mormon history episode. I love those. I would eat those up because I was so fascinated by it, because I had this personal connection to Mormonism. So eventually I just was like, you know what? I want to get as much of Mormonism as possible, all consolidated into one place. And that's kind of what spawned the idea, or what it became the brainchild of Naked Mormonism podcast. And, here it is today, a year and a half later, and it was able to take 3 Brody Awards, which, the Brody Awards are kind of just a small online community of like ex-Mormon stuff. You can go to mainstreetplaza.com to see what they're all about. But yeah, I mean, it's turned out to be quite the adventure, and I've really enjoyed myself, enjoying this adventure.
Well, that you're actually hitting on something that I wanted to specifically have written down here. As we mentioned, and you mentioned, I mentioned during the intro, you received 3 Brody Awards and a few different ones. I think, I can't remember what the last one was, but it was number 1 in best, study or scripture study and first place in the, best new, podcast. You won by a landslide, like almost double the next amount of votes for that. What was the third one for?
The third one was for Best Original Research, which I was kind of bothered by winning that title because I don't really do much original research. Almost all the research that I've done is, I mean, everything that I say on the show is all parroted. Somebody else has already done the research long before me. But it was a very solid compiling of all of the evidence for Joseph Smith's 1826 trial, where he was convicted as a glass looker, where he was using his seer stones to basically take people's money and convince them that they could find treasure buried in the ground from the ancient Spaniards and whatnot. It's a mess. It's absolutely insane. But the episode is Joseph Smith Disorderly Disgrace, I believe, and it had a lot of this research. It had a lot of really good facts and a lot of court notes and stuff like that we were reading. So it became that was the third Brody Award, was Best Original Research.
And if anybody wants to find it, all they got to do is just go over to nakedmormonism.com and they can find the episodes, right?
Yes, sir. You can find them there or on their favorite podcaster of their choice.
Well, you were talking about, you're a history buff. I know that much, just like myself, except for mine's more like World War II history buff.
Oh, very cool.
How did you get into liking history and specifically like Mormon history? I know you explained a little bit more, but I just want to get into a little bit more in depth on that because you really are, you full speed ahead on Mormon history. I know you read a lot of stuff on Mormon history.
Yeah. So Mormon history is just kind of the one facet of history that I have taken like a specialty to. It's kind of caught my affinity a little bit. But history in general is just something that I feel like is not taught very well in public schooling. Because when I was going to school, I would have various history classes, and I remember having one cool history teacher, but other than that, the other history classes I took were just, memorization of names and dates, and then quizzes on those names and dates, and that was it. You didn't get to hear the stories, the human factor that's so important with any of these historical stories that we're talking about. I feel like a better way to learn history is to learn the story, learn what somebody has done, and then, it's mildly important to remember the date or the exact date when it happened, just so you can put it into context. But just knowing that something happened in history is so much more important than knowing the actual date and all of the names surrounding it. For example, Joseph Smith's 1826 trial. Why that's important is because it was before the Book of Mormon came out, and he was convicted for using his seer stone to look for buried treasure and not being able to find any. And why that is so important to the Book of Mormon is because he translated the majority of the Book of Mormon in the same exact way that he would search for buried treasure, by putting a rock in the hat. So you find out this amazing story that's like, holy crap, he went to trial for doing this, and he was convicted because he was conning people. And then he came up with the Book of Mormon in the same exact way. Why is that thing not also part of a con? So it's much more important to see that one small piece of Joseph Smith history in the larger context of the entire person that is Joseph Smith, instead of just understanding that, this justice, Albert Neely, and the constable, blah, 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 and then this person did this, and then there was a conviction for glass looking on March 23rd, 1826. That doesn't really matter. What the conviction was for and who, and the implications later on are much more important. So that's kind of my biggest problem with how history is taught, is it's not taught the right way, at least in my experience. So when I started learning history the right way, when I started learning historical stories and learning about the people behind the historical narrative, the names and dates just kind of fall into place after that, because I've already learned the interesting part.
Well, now, one of the things that I also want to touch on, this is also going into the history. The cool thing about what you get to do is the difference between studying, Mormon history versus the theology and history of every other religion would like maybe save Scientology,
Right.
I know you've remarked before about how, it's so amazing that we have all this record of a relatively new church. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's something I say it feels like every one of my shows is just, I love Mormon history. I love how recent it is. Take a fairly recent episode that I put out. I think it was episode 28, Battle for Zion. At the end of the episode, it covers this battle that happened in Missouri, in Jackson County, Missouri, between the Mormons that were settling there and the non-Mormons that didn't like the Mormons, right? And in the official church history, it gets just one little line. In the history that is recounted by John Whitmer, who was the church's first official historian, it receives a paragraph. But then I was able to go to a person's autobiography that was a first-hand account of what happened. And he gave us like 4 full paragraphs on details and battle details and what happened and people that were shot, and he gave us gore, and he gave us all of the stuff that you really want to know when you learn about a battle. You don't want to just know that a fight happened here and this many people died and so on and just move on to the next topic. No, that's not interesting. And the people actually fighting there and how many people got shot and why they were shot, and the people like the autobiography that I read, the guy that was recounting it actually was shot 3 times himself. And it's just amazing that he was, you get to travel with him on this journey for, a few days while he's, professed dead by the local doctor. And, one of the church leaders sent a brethren to him and said that you will not die. And then he didn't die. And then he, and his stomach bloated up because he had internal bleeding. And it was just so much more intense because you get to feel what it was actually like to be there. So that's the best thing about Mormon history is we don't have just one place to go to look for it. If you find out about an account, there's almost always going to be another recounting from a first-hand witness that was there as well that has an alternate perspective to offer about a set occurrence. So,
which we also get to see not just the battles and stuff like that. We get to see somewhat the inner workings of Joe's mind, as he's going along. We also get to see, I think you talked about it on your latest episode, the young lady that he, I guess, first started, maybe touching on polygamy and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And you get her review, you get Emma Smith, his wife's view and all that. It's just amazing that you have all this, such a rich history to be able to actually, you don't have to interpret it. It's just what it is.
Oh, yeah. And that's something that I find fascinating, too, is the polygamy in Mormonism. It's so intertwined. Like, so many Mormons today just kind of nod and say, yeah, polygamy is something that happened. They did it because there was a shortage of men and so on and so forth, which isn't true. And they just kind of write it off. But polygamy is so intertwined in Mormon history that there's no separating the two one from another. I make the claim or put a stake at the claim that Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon were actually tarred and feathered the first time in 1832 in Hiram, Ohio, because Joe might have been getting a little frisky with a 16-year-old at the time. And you see these people enter in the evidence that I used to verify that claim or to stand by that claim is the mob when they were beating up Joe, they wanted to castrate him, which you don't want to castrate a man because he's professing the wrong religion. You want to castrate him because, he did something with your little sister or whatnot. So the polygamy is just so tightly intertwined, and you run into various things in the storyline that surprise me. For example, when the Book of Mormon was being written, when Joe was 23, 24 years old, his youngest wife that he would ever marry was born at that time. It's just so fascinating to know that Helen Mar Kimball, the wife that he married when she was 14 years old, she was born at the time that the Book of Mormon was actually being written at the beginning of Joe's reign. So it's just so interesting to see these timelines match up, and just to see